My clock says 12:30, so it must be 1:30 your time. I'd like to welcome you back to the Coaching Pathways. I'm hoping that all of you who are here were with us in August, at least for one or two of the days, and so that we can continue our learning about coaching cycles. I'm just going to share my screen for a little bit. We'll go back and forth. So my name is Susan Lallier, and I'm one of the facilitators for this coaching pathway. And the other facilitators are Suzy Coffman from St. Joseph ISD, Asha Williams from Oakland, and Melissa Weirenga. Today, we're going to continue discussing the coaching cycle and our work around coaching cycles, and using this particular model that we use in Michigan of goal setting, co-planning, and implementation, various ways of implementation, and then in between all the things that coaches do to prepare for goal setting, for co-planning, for implementation. What we're going to do today is just a quick review of August's work, really quick. We want to do a little bit more about thinking about teacher assets.
Maybe I'll do.
Is there about? We want to in August, you put up a whole bunch of questions and things you were wondering about. And we addressed some of those during the Pathways work in August, but we have still a list of unanswered questions. So we thought we would take a few minutes to answer some of those. So we're going to do this first maybe 30 minutes or so in as a whole group of about 60 some. And then we're going to break into breakout rooms. And when you left on the last day of the August Institute, you marked on your Post-it whether you considered yourself new to coaching cycles, or whether you wanted to focus on school-wide goals for your coaching cycles, or whether you've been doing coaching cycles and you really want to get into more of the deeper coaching cycles. And so you self-selected one of those three. Now, I put together all of your requests, and you will be sent to the breakout room that you selected. If you did not submit one of the Post-its because you were not there, or because you were participating remotely and didn't get your choice, Melissa will stay in the room after we go and go to breakout rooms, and she'll assign you to the breakout room to which you would like to go. So if you aren't automatically sent, you'll be asked if you want to go to the new to coaching cycle, go to the one that's focusing on school-wide goals, or go to the one about deeper coaching cycles. So that's how we'll work, and I'll just remind you of that when we get to that point. So in August, we spent 3 days in our pathway work, and I think Erin showed you this morning the pathway landing page, but this is also in the agenda, and it has everything from August, and now we're starting to include things from October. So this is kind of our place where we will, you can find everything that we've done. So one of the things I wanted just to really move you forward here is to look at the slides from from the 3 days in August. And I think especially what you might want to review on these slides is on day 2. We talked about things like why goal setting might be difficult, and some things that you might address to address those difficulties. We talked about why co-planning might be difficult and how you might address those difficulties. We talked about why modeling might be difficult and how you might address those. We talked about co-teaching and how you might address those, and observation and how you might address those. So in particular, you might want to review those slides when you're in one of the stages of the coaching cycle and you're having some difficulty and you're saying, oh, is that something that we've heard about before, perhaps in August? So you might get some ideas there. But all the slides from all 3 days are there for you to look at. The other things that are there is this reading teacher article on coaching and teachers, what teachers want to know about coaching. There were passages from No Random Acts of Literacy Coaching. There were some resources from the coaching cycle pathway. Those were the resources that show you when we've talked about coaching cycles in different, we could just open it, in different quarterlies and in different institutes. So if you wanted to go back and just review some of the things that have already been discussed in other quarterlies at kickoff institutes, quarterlies, advanced institutes, this is a sheet that you might want to go to. The other thing that I did was you started to share some of the resources that you use for coaching. And we had a few of them on this sheet, but you added a lot more. And so I took all of your input from the Post-its and have added them now to this coaching resources with ratings. So for example, the book, The Art of Coaching by Elena Aguilar, several people mentioned it and they all gave it ratings of 4. Then there were some people that watched, that have read Coaching for Equity by Elena Aguilar. Some people gave it a 4, some people gave it a 5. Some of these books were mentioned but not rated. And so just wanted to let you know that these ratings were either from one person or from a few people. You might see it differently, but there were a lot of people who submitted The Impact Cycle by Jim Knight, Student-Centered Coaching, Student-Focused Coaching. These are all different ways of looking at coaching, but a lot of similarities amongst them as well. So those might be some things you wanted to read if you're looking for professional journals. There's also a set of podcasts that you might like. Everybody likes different podcasts, but I think these are Elena Aguilar's.
No.
And this is Buzzing with Miss B. Somebody recommended that. She's got podcasts, but also be aware that she really, really pushes joining different ones of her workshops that she charges for. She pushes going to Teachers Pay Teachers to get some of her documents. So you want to just be judicious about, just know that. And I'm not saying her documents aren't good or anything like that, but there's always a little bit of advertising in her work if you sign up for her. So if you want, this is open for anybody can edit it. So if you have more books or articles that you have been reading that you think are really terrific, this would be a good place to put them for your colleagues to be able to see. So that's kind of a lot of what we did in August. And so I just wanted to remind you of that resource. And I don't know, Melissa, can you put this, or I can put it in the chat too. I don't know if you have access to it, Melissa.
Yes, I linked the coaching cycle pathway resources in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. So nice to have somebody who's just so good at this kind of stuff. So we wanted now to circle back, I think, to our morning work a little bit. And we want to think more about teacher assets. And we're going to start off with examples from us as facilitators, but you'll have a turn to share ideas about teacher assets later when you get into your breakout groups. You heard about the importance this morning of understanding teacher assets, and we just want to expand it a little bit by talking about how you would use those teacher assets when you're actually in a coaching cycle or a coaching collaboration with teachers. So for example, let's say that you know that you're going to work with a teacher on fluency. And this teacher has told you that she's given her students an interest inventory. And so I think that when you think about it, one of her assets is she knows the importance of gaining student interest in order to plan instruction. Another asset is she gave an inventory, so she obviously had some knowledge of that, of interest inventories, and either picked one or selected one from a group or developed one. So she knows about a variety of interest inventories, or at least about one of them. And so she's coming into that coaching cycle about fluency already knowing that she wants to incorporate her student interests into it, and already having gathered the information about her student interests. And so that's just a ton of work that you're not going to have to do with this teacher, because she's already brought that material in, and you can tell that she's really interested in using those student interests. And so when you talk about fluency, you can use those ideas that she brings in to say, we're going to work on paired reading. One of our strategies in fluency is going to be paired reading. So, we could pair students by interest and have them practice their fluency by reading books that are of interest to both of them, or reading pieces of text that are of interest to both of them. So you're already building on her assets in order to really develop a really good coaching cycle on fluency, where students are going to be paired by those interests. And so this is just one way that you can kind of start thinking about how teachers' interests, and you're going to move them into your coaching work with them, either your coaching cycle or your coaching collaboration. And so Suzy has another example of how teacher assets can impact coaching collaborations.
Thank you, Susan. And this morning was so great to really think about what our teachers bring. And when we were planning for this time together, one teacher came to mind about the assets that she brings around writing and differentiation. Her and I have worked in the past on her small group reading groups, but she has really seen the impact of doing that, really focusing in on having those assessments lead to what she's doing in her small group for reading. And so she wanted to incorporate that into her writing as well. So this teacher already knows the value of differentiation. She also understands how I can gather those informal, formative assessments. Again, made a lot of connections to what Dr. Tanya Wright was saying with what this teacher was doing, trying to find what students are doing while they're reading and writing, specifically more on the writing aspect. So just this teacher's knowledge around just her drive to want to differentiate and personalize learning for students in her classroom, and utilizing those assessments to help guide what she's doing, not just in her reading groups, but now moving that into her writing groups. And so just when I think of the value that teacher brings and the assets that she brings, just focusing again in on differentiation and how her her desire to want to have that in those groups, she already brought that to the table. She already brought the importance of being able to really personalize that learning. And so that was just one example that I wanted to share with you around writing and differentiation. And then I'm going to pass it over to Asha to share another example.
Everyone. Yes, this morning's learning was very good, just thinking about that asset-based approach to coaching. And as I thought more about the asset-based approach to coaching, I actually thought a little bit more about a PO series that a colleague and I designed just the other year around vocabulary instruction. And in this series, both coaches and teachers came together to study the vocabulary development across the day. And they got an opportunity to build out some lessons together, go through some mini coaching cycles together. So as I was thinking about that series, I thought about one coach-teacher pair and the assets that they really had, that they brought together as a team, which really contributed to a more strategic, which really contributed to a more strategic goal setting process and mini coaching cycle for them. So when I thought about the teacher was really open and excited about new learning. That teacher was invited to the book study series, but they were really open to new learning. And a lot of times the teachers may not be at that stage. So that was an asset that they brought, that she brought. And she agreed to work alongside her coach and learn some new things and try out some new things. So she was really willing to take a few risks. She had some prior knowledge about the importance of using child-friendly explanations during read alouds. But another asset was that she was just curious to know more about Essential 2.3. She wanted to know a little bit more about how child-friendly explanations and words and concepts really helped to build out those lessons, those read aloud lessons, how she could use different tools like, movement, props, and videos, and examples and non-examples to really make her read aloud lessons more powerful. And then most of all, how does she spread that knowledge across the day and have some transfer for her students from into their writing, using some of those vocabulary words in their writing. So she brought a lot of assets already to the table, and that helped them to be a little more strategic in their planning. The coach, when I thought about the coach, she really brought a lot of assets as well. She had some prior knowledge of essential instructional practices, so specific knowledge around essential coaching practice too, around read alouds. A co-learner and co-facilitator. So she was learning together. Am I back?
Okay. You're back.
So she was willing to position herself as a co-learner, learning together with her teacher about vocabulary instruction. So to dig deeper, that was an asset that coach brought. And also the coach had to establish some rapport with this teacher before coming to the series. So, there might've been some initial steps, and I think about coaching essential 3 around building collaborative relationships. That coach had already started building some relationships with the teacher, knowing a little bit about what they wanted in order to be able to just invite her to the series and for the teacher to accept the invitation. She'd already built a collaborative relationship with her. And so when I thought about these assets that both the coach and the teacher brought together, I saw how that really helped to build out their coaching cycle. And walking away from that mini coaching cycle, the teacher was able to share how her thinking shifted. She shared that she usually did give child-friendly definitions during read alouds, but she found it very beneficial to pre-plan those things with her coach. And she had a more purpose for she had more purpose for the words that she used after reading. It also helped her to be more purposeful when choosing words, because there were many words in that text that she just didn't know what to pick at the onset, but working together collaborative with her coach, she was able to become more strategic about some of the words that she was choosing to give child-friendly explanations about. So just thinking about the assets that you bring when you're open to collaborating, you're positioning yourself as a coach, as a co-learner, you're co-planning together, it really does add value to those coaching cycles.
And I think one of the things that I really appreciate you're doing, Asha, was talk about the assets of the coach, that she had prior knowledge, that she was willing to be a co-learner, those kinds, and that she was good at developing rapport with teachers. This morning in some of the groups I was in, people had a hard time articulating your real good assets. They could tell you you could tell us what was successful, but then you didn't say, but partially it was successful because I was persistent or I had knowledge or whatever. So you really want to think about your own assets and as we go. When you get into your groups then later, you're going to talk about a teacher who had assets, or assets that you know about a teacher and how that might help you work with that teacher. So I'm just going to go back and just share for 1 minute. We wanted to look at another question, and I'd like you to be thinking about it because we're going to ask you to add your ideas to the chat about how we can successfully invite teachers to participate in coaching cycles or coaching collaborations. A lot of you weren't sure how you issue that invitation or how you make that happen. So we wanted just to give you a couple of ideas, but then add your ideas into the chat. How are you inviting teachers to work with you, and what's been successful in that work? So I think, Asha, you're going to start, right?
But yeah, I was just thinking about, we have multiple districts that have chosen a school-wide goal or a district-wide goal. Maybe it's directly connected to their priority focus area might be directly connected to one of the essential instructional practices. So if that is, if you have a school-wide goal, it's really beneficial to lean into that goal when you're inviting teachers to engage in a coaching cycle. But if let's say your coaching cycle, your priority focus area is small group instruction, you might want to talk more specifically to that teacher about some of the bullets underneath essential instructional practice 3, and see what targeted area they might want to work on, that gives them a little more autonomy, a little more choice, thinking more strategically about their assessments and their students' needs, thinking about how they have more flexible groups, and maybe you're co-planning or setting goals around being intentional about selecting or putting groups together and then building out lessons from there. So it's really helpful to think about what are some common goals that your building might have or that your district might have, and then going a little bit deeper and inviting teachers to think more strategically around those goals that are already in place in order to engage in the coaching cycle.
And Suzy, you had a kind of a different idea. And some are coming into the chats as well already, I see.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for pointing that out, Susan. And yeah, I just wanted to share just one example of a way to successfully bring teachers in, especially if maybe not they're hesitant, but you haven't had that coaching opportunity yet. I think of that layered approach. You know, we have PD with our whole, whether it's with the whole staff or with a grade level in particular. You know, usually when we have shared understanding or shared learning, then I might have individual teachers that reach out that want to either dig in more or They want to deepen their knowledge around an area in particular that maybe you discussed with the whole grade level or with the whole staff. So I was just trying to think of that layered approach and different, because whenever I have time with the whole staff, there's always teachers that reach out wanting to know more, being those learners that they are. And so another idea is like a lunch and learn. I know one of my schools, the K-3 teachers are going through letters. And so once a month, I offer a time for us to come together to share one idea or strategy that they have implemented that worked really well with their students. So just an opportunity to have them share across classrooms things that are working really well. And then I usually have teachers then reach out, can you tell me a little bit more about that one strategy in particular? What does that look like? And then we can also utilize the teacher that shared that idea. Maybe they could go and we can co-observe together in the classroom and really look at that strategy in particular. Or we could offer, I could come in and model that strategy in particular. So there's different ways and routes we can go about meeting that teacher's needs. But just those informal ways to bring people together around a certain topic or initiative. And then usually from there, teachers always reach out asking for whether it's deeper learning or how that really can apply to their students. So that's just an example that I wanted to share with you all.
And so we invite you to add more things into the chat now about ways that you have successfully invited people in. I see that some people are offering menus of things that that you as a coach are interested in doing as a collaboration. That sometimes works really well. This is interesting. They offer teacher sketches to participate in coaching cycles. So that's very interesting, because that means maybe that teachers are willing to work an hour after school or before school, so they have a little bit more time to work with you. So that's really a nice thing. So those PLC conversations, it's always nice to be part of a PLC, and then always kind of at the end, use that question that we always say, how can I support you as we move forward? Let me know how I can support you. These are some things I could do. And you usually get some takers that way. Okay, so somebody said they offered a menu, but tied it to teacher availability, those kinds of things. Anytime you can show your credibility by like reading aloud in a classroom, showing that you can engage the students in important learning activities is really important. So I think some of those ideas are might be useful to everybody. We can certainly try to save the chat when we're done, if one of us remembers that. Melissa. I'm so bad at that. Okay. So the other question that people asked was, how can we oh, I'm sorry. How do we set explicit end goals, and what measures can we use to determine whether that end goal has been met? So sometimes you set goals with teachers, but you don't really set what you expect students to be able to do in terms of that goal. And so you end your coaching cycle and you're not sure if the students have done what you had hoped that they would do. So it's really important to be as specific as possible. And I just wanted to share with you some of these general goals. So oftentimes we start with something like, we want to improve phonics, or I want the students to improve their fluency work, or I want them to expand their vocabulary, or I want them to build comprehension, or I want them to improve their writing skills. Well, those are very, very, very general. So how can you move from that general end cycle to a more explicit end goal? So one of the ways that you can start to do it is to say how you're going to do that. So you're going to improve phonics skills through the use of differentiated reading instruction, small group lessons. Those DRI lessons are the Walpole and McKenna lessons that many of you use in many of your districts are using. Maybe you want to improve fluency, but how are you going to do it? Well, through the use of echo reading and partner reading. Maybe you want to improve comprehension. Well, what aspect of comprehension? Comprehension is so huge, and we don't we need to really narrow it down. So we're going to improve oral retelling skills through the use of a story map or some kind of graphic organizer. Now, it could have been you're going to improve written retelling skills if your kids are in, your students are in 2nd or 3rd grade. But whatever it is, at least you know what aspect of comprehension you're going to work on and how you are probably going to approach it through a story map or some other type of graphic organizer that meets what you want the students to be able to do. So you've gone from this general to a more explicit end goal. And then you have to think about how are you going to measure those explicit goals. So if we look at the DRI one, the differentiated reading instruction one, and people who don't know about Walpole and McKenna, they have a set of lesson groups. So they have like beginning alphabet knowledge group, using letter sound group. They have blends and digraphs and are controlled and vowel teams, and you move from one to the other by passing the progress monitoring test for the group that you're in. So if you pass BAK, you can move into using letter sounds. And then if you pass using letter sounds, you can move into using letter patterns and so forth. So when you're thinking about what's our expectation? Our expectation might be for DRI to move from one group to the next group, but you have to consider how long will the data collection continue? If you're starting in January and you've got 18 weeks, some of those groups take longer than other groups. So you might have a group that has 30 lessons and a group that has 15 lessons. So you can't expect the group that has 30 lessons to get through and move through as many groups and move up the ladder as fast as those who are in groups where the lessons are only 15 days. So you might have different expectations for different groups. For example, you might expect your building alphabet knowledge group to go to using letter sounds, but you might expect your blends and digraphs group to get through blends and digraphs, are controlled vowels, and move on to VCE words. So you might have different expectations for different groups depending on what you're measuring. Some people say, I want all of our students to be phonics secure by the end of the year. And they know what phonics secure means for 1st graders and what phonics secure means for 2nd graders. But when you look at your students, is it realistic for all of your students to be phonics secure by the end of the year? Probably not. For example, even this morning, I was in a group where they were saying that, yes, we expect 1st graders or kindergartners to come into kindergarten with so many letters and so many knowledge of so many letters and letter sounds. But in our school, that just isn't the case. Our students haven't gone to preschool. And so they come in with about 3-letter names, and that's it. Well, they're probably not going to be able to be kindergarten phonics secure by the end of the year. Some of those students who come in with no letter sound knowledge at all. So you have to make sure that your expectation is realistic. And remember, you're in a coaching cycle. So what's realistic for that coaching cycle? If you're trying to improve fluency through the use of echo reading and partner reading, are you going to look at the number of correctly read words per minute, which is a way that lots of intervention groups do it? They say, we want you to gain 4 words four new words or 4 words correct per minute, an increase every week. And then the question is, should you do it every week or should you do it on an average of 6 weeks? So over the course of 6 weeks, we want our students to have an average growth of about 4 words correct per minute, because the first couple of weeks might not be as good, and then your students won't meet the expectations, even if they really increase their words per minute average by the end. So you have to think about that. Some people say we want our students to meet mid-year or end-of-year oral reading fluency benchmark. Well, if your purpose in your cycle is to really help that teacher get echo reading and partner reading going and making sure that students are doing it well and consistently, and your coaching cycle's 4 weeks, really just by having a 4-week cycle, can you expect them to meet that mid-year or end-of-year oral reading fluency benchmark? Probably not, unless you make sure that those echo reading and partner reading and other activities continue through until the mid-year assessment or the end-of-year assessment. So you just can't stop what you've been doing in fluency after the 4-week cycle. So you have to really think about that. If we're talking about this story map, possible ways to measure that growth is to have the two of you develop a rubric related to the story map and score the oral reading retelling at the beginning and at the end of the cycle. And of course, when you do this, you're going to make sure that you use the same story map for your assessments as you use for the instruction. I think that when you're thinking about this particular goal to improve oral retelling skills through the use of the story map, you and your teacher also have to decide if part of your rubric is going to be the way the students fill out the story map. Because do they have to have a well-constructed story map as well as a good oral retelling? Or are you just saying, using whatever story map they've created, can they use that to retell the story aligned with their story map? Most teachers want a good story map and a good oral retelling, but don't put the development of the good story map into their rubric. So just something to think about when you develop those rubrics. It may be a little bit more extensive than you think. And how will you know that the expectations have been met? So for example, in the differentiate reading instruction work, you might have separate expectations for each group so that 80% of the students will meet the expectations that were set for them. So if you have different expectations for different groups of how far they're going to go, then 80% of the students will meet those expectations, even if the expectations are a little bit different. The fluency, is it 80% of the students will increase their words correct per minute by an average of 4 words over the period of 8 weeks? Or like 70% will meet the end of year oral reading fluency benchmark, meaning that they're going to be really continuing past the coaching cycle work with their fluency work. And that really does give you as a coach an opportunity to go back into the classrooms after you finish that coaching cycle to see, oh, the students are still echo reading, they're still partner reading, this teacher's still going around and listening and giving advice on fluency, or the teachers added a new strategy to help with fluency. So sometimes having a mid-year and end-of-year oral reading fluency benchmark expectation is not a bad idea, because it makes sure that the teacher continues those practices over time. The oral retelling one, it could be that you're just looking at things like 75% of the students will score at the meeting or exceeding expectations level of the rubric. So you might start off with only 25% meeting or exceeding, and you want to get to 75%. That's one way of doing it. Or you could say, every student's going to move up at least one level on the rubric. So the emerging people are going to get at least to developing, the developing to meeting, the meeting to exceeding, and the exceeding will stay the same. Or you could say that meeting and exceeding will stay the same, whatever your expectation is. But those are two different ways of looking at it. You could have both expectations if you wanted to, but if you have more than one expectation, make sure that you report out data for both of them. As I said, if there's two expectations, be sure to specify how each will be measured. And then I just want to put in a little plug for comprehension. I've been collecting data reports for the last couple of years, and the first year I got one comprehension data report, and last year I got 0 comprehension data reports. And I think that, I think number one, a lot of schools are really working on phonics right now and phonemic awareness. And phonics and phonemic awareness and fluency are the easiest things for students to make progress in. So comprehension, however, is the end goal of our work. We want all students to be really good comprehenders of what they read and using their reading for authentic purposes. So I'm just encouraging you to think about, are there places where you really could focus on comprehension, such as if you look at the essential instructional practices, certainly in the read alouds, you're modeling those comprehension practices. And if you're working with Essential 3, you can work on comprehension strategies during your small group lessons. That's bullet 4 of Essential 3. And if you're writing, you can write to show comprehension, which is bullet 4 of instructional practice 6. So I just want to encourage you to think about, are there teachers who are ready to focus on comprehension if you're tailoring a school-wide goal around small group instruction, reading or writing? Can you tailor it around comprehension in those small group work? So think about which teachers are really ready for that and which students are really ready for that. They have their foundational skills down and they're ready really to focus on comprehension in a more basic way. So I think we're ready now to move to our breakout rooms. And in fact, we're more than ready. And so we're going to, there's a document that I think Melissa is going to put up for you or has put in the chat. And if you'd open it up and leave it in your browser, it's going to tell you what you're going to do in your breakout room, depending on who's running your breakout room. And as you go to your breakout room, it may take a little bit of time for everyone to get to the breakout room because there are probably a few people unassigned. But think about a teacher with whom you will be working. What assets does this teacher bring to the collaboration? And how can this asset be especially helpful for the expected coaching cycle or coaching collaboration? And it would be really nice if there was a question mark at the end of that sentence instead of a period. But so as you go, think about that. And I know that Suzy and Asha are flexible, so they will kind of handle the time factor a little bit since we're about 5 minutes late.